Let's take you back to our top story. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warning that Russia's Vladimir Putin will keep driving the Ukraine war wider and deeper unless he's stopped. Let's cross live to New York and speak to our international correspondent for more on the latest developments as well as what to expect when Nigerian Vice President Kashim Shettima gives his speech in a few hours. Glad to have you join me, Adefemi. I think I should start with what Macron experienced firsthand, the New York traffic. I gather he caught Trump from the traffic and had to walk to the UN building.
Yes, absolutely, Indy. I think what we saw there was Emmanuel Macron being a normal citizen, because that is truly the experience of being on the roads during this time of year. During the United Nations General Assembly, you will have severe road closures and then the traffic calls thereafter. So you have everyone walking from quite various lengths to get to the United Nations headquarters, which is where we are now. That is why it's always recommended to be wearing comfortable shoes. But going back to what you said specifically about Emmanuel Macron, he was indeed trying to navigate around New York City, but because Donald Trump, the US president, was outside and on ground, there was a clearly heightened security, and that meant a lot of roads were closed, gridlock traffic, which forced him to go on his feet. And even though he was on his feet, he was still kept by barricades. It was genuinely a light-hearted moment. You did see him conversing with the police officer who was keeping him and his delegation from crossing over, and you saw that the police officer was also quite light-hearted, apologized to him. There were general smiles all around. It gave Macron the opportunity to really converse with his fans and people who were happy to see him on the street. We did see him take pictures and selfies and the like. So on the whole, it was quite a heartwarming experience, because you can imagine that if this were to happen in a different part of the world, you might not see the smiles and the laughs and the gestures that we saw. You might see the evil head of big manism come out and have people ask you, "Don't you know who I am?" You're saying that I cannot
what
pass.
You're talking about.
It was very. I think the word is interesting to see someone looking at a situation which meant he is no different from anyone else and taking it on the chin. We have all experienced the road closure. I give you an example. When I was leaving UNHQ last night after finishing off my report, I was also held back by a barricade, as were many other journalists, and we had to wait while streams of convoys, I don't think I've ever seen a presidential convoy so large, went past. So this just shows that, here at the United Nations General Assembly, everyone is part and parcel of this unique experience.
Yes, world leaders, interesting indeed, and I know where you were coming from when you were talking about, do you know who I am? I understand that. Well, what leaders at UNGA have been responding to Trump's speech, especially what seems like an about face saying Ukraine will win the war?
Well, absolutely. You're seeing a general consensus when it comes to Ukraine of genuine support for him. Ukraine has enjoyed a lot of international support from the outset. It has been more than 3 years since the initial Russian invasion. And though there have been stumbles here and there, essentially what you do see is the world community coming around Ukraine at many different facets. So on the human side, in terms of the refugee crisis, especially at the very early onset of this invasion, many countries across Europe and the wider world opened their gates really to refugees coming out of Ukraine. That is the human level. When we're looking at this in more diplomatic terms, again, you've got a lot of international prowess backing Ukraine and trying to bring the country away from war and closer to reconciliation. You're seeing that with this coalition of the willing that includes many countries around the world, most notably in mainland Europe. The United Kingdom obviously is not in mainland Europe, but a leader in the coalition of the willing. France to Germany too. So there is a lot of support, has been a lot of support. But I think in the background, and this was the question that was put to him during the press conference, was whether or not he was concerned that everyone's attention is now really focused on Gaza, on Israel, and its perpetuating violence in Gaza across the Palestinian territory. It seems as though that is taking up the lion's share of consciousness when it comes to conflict around the world. So he was asked a question about whether or not he is concerned that people have forgotten about the plight of Ukrainians. And he did say that, listen, when we're looking at war and conflict, these things are happening in tandem. many conflicts are happening simultaneously, and they are all worthy of attention. So it doesn't seem that on its face that he is worried that people are forgetting about what is happening with Ukraine. But what he is worried about is that Russia continues to perpetuate its violence, and it doesn't seem as though anyone can bring Russia to the negotiating table. Donald Trump tried, and at the general debate, he did talk about how he had ended 7 wars in 7 months. It's not accurate. And if we're using Ukraine and Russia as an example of that, it just shows that his interference hasn't really translated into tangible change or tangible peace. Some would say that Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has played Donald Trump like a fiddle, came to Anchorage, Alaska, participated in this peace summit, but really it didn't turn into anything. They are no closer, that is Ukraine and Russia, to sitting down, these two leaders across each other. This is a situation that is reaching a really static stalemate. You've got Russia saying that Ukraine would have to give up that land before it's willing to negotiate. And you've got Ukraine saying that giving up land, ceding land, is simply something that it cannot do. This is something that could only be approved by a referendum. And stands there is no appetite in Ukraine for any type of giving up of their territory to Russia. So that leaves the world in a quagmire, leaves Ukraine and this crisis continually in this perpetual quagmire until something will shake. It is unclear what's going to happen. Sanctions are definitely something that Volodymyr Zelensky has called for, but even in the aftermath of those sanctions, it's something that has not debilitated Russia in terms of its economy, and certainly not in its fighting prowess and its appetite to continue this war.
Yeah, now that you mentioned the word accurate, I'll get to Colombian President Gustavo Petro and, of course, Zelensky himself. But while Trump attacked friends and opponents alike, making controversial and often factually inaccurate assertions, Macron spent his speech passionately urging a return to multilateralism in a pointed rebuke to Trump's nationalistic worldview. He also called on Trump to put pressure on Israel to stop the war in Gaza.
Absolutely. This is something that we expected from Emmanuel Macron's comments at the general debate. This is him continuing on his role of really a peacemaker. You have to put this into context. When you're looking at France domestically, Emmanuel Macron is in a lot of trouble, or has been in a lot of trouble. The government failed. He had to appoint a new prime minister. He understands the chaos of political strife, and that informs his decision to want more countries to move away from this type of rhetoric of protectionism, of isolationism, and move towards multilateralism. It's interesting because the actual theme of this year's General Assembly is that of unity, of the coming together, and it seems as though it is quite ironic that this is happening at a time where the world is so checkered, so destabilized. And then when you look at US President Donald Trump's comments, I don't think anyone was anticipating him coming out and being, meek and mild and quiet. I think we all anticipated that he was going to speak quite harshly and quite openly and quite abruptly, as he usually does. But what he said did catch a lot of people by surprise, especially when he was talking about the aspects of migration and how countries who fail to secure their borders are doomed to hell. These are very strong words, and something that is directly opposite to what a leader like Emmanuel Macron wants to, continue perpetuating. We have to also put this in context because France does understand the importance of secure borders. It does have and has entered into agreement with the United Kingdom over this migration crisis over the English Channel, which separates France from England. And clearly you've got many instances of people going in those rubber dinghies, overfilling them and attempting to cross the channel. It's a journey that is arduous, that is dangerous, that is often deadly. So what we see is the United Kingdom and France adopt this 1 in, 2 out deal, and 2 in, 1 out deal. And it on its face, we can understand that it is both governments trying their hardest to tackle this issue, but it is an issue that does need a fitting solution. So going back to Donald Trump's comments, to that extent, perhaps there could be some areas in which you could see, okay, he has a point about the importance of secure borders and migration. But, the intensity of his comments just take it a bit far. And, yes, there are many instances where he talks about, again, harsh criticisms of United Kingdom, of Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, who is, of course, a Muslim, and talked about how, his leadership is tantamount to allowing recklessness on the streets of London. It's something that would cause a lot of offence, but that doesn't take up all of what he had to say. It was definitely the majority, but there were some lighter moments of President Donald Trump's comments at the General Assembly yesterday. For example, he talks about how he embraced with Brazilian President Lula da Silva. He said, and they were speaking one after the other, quite close proximity to each other. And he said that as he was entering, Lula was walking out, and they hugged each other and embraced. And he also talks about, having a positive meeting with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. So not all negative there, but, Donald Trump will be Trump.
I wish we had time to talk about the VP Shetima, but apparently I'm told we've run out of time. What he would say.
Well, very quickly, Indy. I've just spoken to the Vice President again. I had spoken to him earlier this week, just spoken to him again. I've just spoken to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we are in for a treat when it comes to his speech. It's definitely going to be one perpetuating the importance of unity and making sure Africa is represented on the Security Council, Nigeria specifically. So we are looking forward to this evening and hearing what the Vice President has to say.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Thank you so much, Adefemi, for your interesting reporting. That's our correspondent there at the Onga. Thank you so much.